to do that. I love you, until we go back into the cycle again. So it has a pattern, and I've trained, my team and I have trained just so many faith leaders in churches with what to say and what not to say when an individual comes forward to say, I need help, or can you pray with me? Or I need support in this situation. I don't want to leave him or her. I just need some support. That we actually train them and teach them what to say and what not to say to avoid escalating the situation.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much for that perspective, Michelle. Brandon, I wanted to get your feedback and get your perspective before we move on to our next poll. I'm just looking again. I know that you do some training as well, and looking at it from, what to do if someone is afraid to go to the next step, to maybe report the abuse, or if they're afraid of, retaliation and things of that nature. What is your experience with that from your perspective?
So, and Daniel, are you asking if they're at the point where they're ready to report to law enforcement and they're fearful of retribution, or they're
Yes,
speaking
sir.
to a trusted person?
To law enforcement.
Sure. So, I mean, that's something that, again, I think, once a survivor gets to the point when they do actually call the police, right? That's probably, time 20 or whatever the case, right? By the time they're ready to engage with the police, that's usually the most for that person, that's usually the most dangerous time in this whole relationship. And so it really requires once a survivor trusts the justice system with their experience, the justice system owes them something more than a patrol response, and arrest, and then on to the next call, right? And so that's why what I'm passionate about doing is building this high risk team to really provide those services, right? So we are looking beyond the what happened tonight. We're talking about what's happened the last 5 years. How are we going to protect you for the next 5 years, right? And it's not that we are telling that person, hey, you need to leave. We're saying, hey, if that's what you want to do, here are the resources to accomplish that.
Yes.
Again, I can't say it enough. We should be providing options, not dilemmas. And when I say that, we as the justice system present dilemmas when we arrest an abusive partner and then provide no further follow-up to that survivor, because arrest in and of itself most of the time does not solve the problem. And most of the time it actually exacerbates it, right? So if, like, for example, if you're in a state that has mandatory arrest laws, okay, the legislature has given you your marching orders, but then what do we do next, right? Are we connecting them to community-based advocates? Are we, engaging them with what's happening in the court system? There's just so much that has to be done if we're going to be effective and actually keep people safe, rather than just exacerbate whatever situation they're facing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Excellent points. That's why we have you on this panel, Brandon, to give us that additional perspective. Thank you so much. All right, so this is discussion poll number 2. Again, we want to hear from you during this webinar. You can participate in our polls that are brought to you by Slido. On the next slide, you will see 2 ways to join our interactive polls. You can use your smartphone to capture the QR code, or visit the Slido website at slido.com and enter the poll ID number. Just join the poll and make your selection. The collective results will appear on the screen. If you haven't already joined, here is the screen. You can use the QR code or join the poll at slido.com and enter the ID 2895677 that is listed on the screen. I think we are ready to go. All right, so here is our next poll that will lead us into our part 2 of our discussion: domestic violence prevention. If you become a witness to domestic violence, what is the best course of action? Do nothing, it's none of my business. Alert someone about the domestic violence. Provide options and support the one being abused, or unsure. We'll give you a few minutes to enter your responses. Okay, I think we have all of our responses. Looks like providing options and support the one being abused. Won this poll. Little bit of information related to this particular poll: domestic violence prevention. Helping to prevent further domestic violence is the emphasis here. Please think about the following feedback. Provide a non-judgmental space. Develop a safety plan with the one who is being abused. Create opportunities to engage in self-care activities. Be supportive whether or not the one being abused stays with the abuser. And respect the decision or the decisions of the one being abused, and continue to care for them. Again, this information is from the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Okay, so this is panel discussion part 2, when silence speaks, the role of bystanders in domestic violence. So the bystander effect, I'm sure a lot of us have heard of this already. Generally speaking, according to Psychology Today, the bystander effect occurs when the presence of others discourages an individual from intervening in an emergency situation against a bully or during an assault or other crime. Then there's cultural silence. We mentioned cultural issues and things earlier. Recognizing abuse. What are the warning signs of abuse? Accountability in communities. What can the larger community do regarding domestic violence prevention? And finally, empowering interventions. What creative strategies are available? We know some of the popular things, the domestic violence hotline. There may be some intervention programs for even abusers in communities, and then effective domestic violence legislation. So that's a hot button right now when we're talking about legislation. So, Brandon, from a law enforcement perspective, what can you tell us about people who are friends and family of domestic violence victims or survivors? In other words, do you hear many reports from these individuals, like the family and the friends of people, that, people, those kinds of individuals coming forward to law enforcement to say, hey, my cousin is being abused? Do you see much of that, or is it more so the one being abused?
So typically, right, with law enforcement, we see the number one place that those calls get initiated from is typically from the person being abused. However, a good portion of them do come from concerned friends or family members. And one of the things that, we experience is, right, if the survivor isn't ready to disclose, it oftentimes, the family member will come to us and say, hey, my cousin is being abused. And then law enforcement, right, we're kind of at a fork in the road because we have to make decisions about, okay, well, if we just show up at the house and knock on the door and say, hey, I'm here because your cousin said you were being abused, might we make that situation significantly worse because that survivor's not ready to talk about it, right? And so what that tells us is that they haven't probably safety planned yet. They don't have a plan to where they're going to go next. And then additionally, if we respond and then don't develop probable cause to make an arrest and, make a protection order go in place or something like that, now we've really just made things worse. And so what I would always encourage law enforcement to do is when they receive the reports from the family, really the number one question to ask is, does the person experiencing the abuse, do they feel safe to disclose? Because if they don't, right, we have to handle that in a much different way than we would otherwise. So the advice I would give, concerned friends or family, is really before you make the decision to call law enforcement, have a deeper conversation with the person experiencing violence and make sure that you have the safety plan in place before the call is made. Because right, once law enforcement gets involved, almost every state in the United States has shall arrest laws. So in other words, if law enforcement develops probable cause, we have to take someone to jail. And so if that survivor's not ready for that action to be taken, we can make their situation much worse. And so I would just encourage friends and family to really have a robust discussion about what's going to make them safer. Law enforcement isn't always the answer.
Excellent. Great perspective, Brandon. And then, Michele, what about from your perspective and, talking about clients that may try to pull their family members into the situation when, when they're seeking services? Have you experienced any of that, and how did you handle that?
Great question. Yeah, a majority of our referrals come from family and friends and pastors and employers. So
Mm,
they have witnessed it, the workplace that she's working and she gets a plethora of calls. Where are you? Where are you? Where are you?
yeah.
Or they've witnessed it in the schoolyard. They're going to go pick up a child, their child, and they see their friend being harassed by the husband or spouse. So we've seen it. And actually, some years ago, one of our keynote speakers was Nicole Brown Simpson's sister, Denise,
Mm,
and had reached out to us because their journey of watching for years the signs with their sister, but they saw it, they knew something was wrong, but they didn't know how to address it.
mm,
So for the bystander, it's very frustrating because you're literally watching someone that you love, could be your daughter, your niece, your granddaughter, your neighbor, your best friend, your coworker, but you're watching their personality change before you.
mm-hmm.
So that's what frustrates them. And they're wondering, what do I do? So when they call us, we share with them, well, you need to talk with him or her. What do they want to do? Again, because you can't make that decision for someone because the studies show and the pattern plays out that an individual will return back to the abuser up to 7 times, up to seven
Mm,
times. And that's what frustrates the legal system. That's what frustrates the magistrates. That's what frustrates that part of the cycle that
mm-hmm.
until we really talk about restorative, corrective, and some real changes in behavioral patterns, they're going to go back and repeat the same pattern. And then if
Mm-hmm.
not with the same person, he or she is going to repeat the same behaviors with someone else. So so we really want to work with the frustrated and the supportive family member and friends and even the pastors to say, hey, let her decide. Let
Yeah.
her know that what she's feeling right now is emotional, which is fine. Which is fine. But let's logically talk about what she wants to do next. Talk to her about, if it is definitely physical, talk to her about a safety plan. Where is she going to go financially? What's going to be the next step for the children? What do we need to talk about legally? What do we need to talk about for housing, transportation, and so forth, especially if he holds most of the resources. So
Yeah.
those things, those questions we put before the bystander, and they usually will say, oh, wow, I didn't think about that. I didn't think about that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just for everyone to stand back. Let's think about this 360 before we go in there and create a big mess that escalates unnecessarily. So I hope that addresses some of that in a nutshell, because
Yes,
I
yes.
can do a 2-hour drill down on this, but yeah.
Thank you so much, Michelle. We appreciate your perspective for sure. And Jennifer, getting back to the Atonement series, you play Nicole, Emily's friend in the series. And, some questions are kind of running through my head without giving away too much of the plot and of what's happening in the series. How many people were involved in this situation, and how many people knew that Emily was being abused? Can you give us a little bit of a little
Actually,
teaser?
yeah, actually, the character Nicole was the only one that knew
Oh,
because the husband was abusing her for years, and when the best friend actually said something to her friend Nicole about it, she let her read her diary.
hmm.
And so I guess the victim was keeping this silent for a long time, and she finally felt brave enough to share this with her best friend. But she let her read her diary and she told her what was going on. But it was she was the Nicole is the only one that knows about the abuse. And
Hmm.
that they put their heads together to try to come up with a way to get her out of the situation. But it's really good movie.
So in a roundabout way, Nicole sort of helps Emily come up with an exit strategy.
Yes, they had a plan.
Okay.
The two of them
Yeah.
had a plan, so they teamed up or partnered up and came up with a way to get her best friend out of this situation.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
when the police show